So, welcome. So, I think we're just going to start by introducing ourselves. It's kind of important to know. Go ahead.
My name is Jennifer Noose. I have worked in addictions for around 8 years, and I work in a community health, mental health setting, and I'm from Indiana.
Hi, my name is Mariya, Shcherbinina. Don't try to pronounce that, that's fine. I'm from Ukraine. I currently work as a queer-friendly and expat-friendly therapist in The Hague in the Netherlands, and also co-host Bi Positive, the podcast about the psychological experiences of bisexual plus people.
My name is Marie-Diane Grouchka. Again, if you haven't even understood like what I just said, it's okay. MD will be fine. I'm originally from France, but I live in the Netherlands, and actually I work with her. And we have a private practice. As you said, queer-friendly, expat-friendly. And what can I say? Yeah, bi positive as well. And as for like the way we work, we both try to be as integrative as possible in our approach. I also am trained as a EMDR practitioner, so maybe a little more is trauma than you do. And that's it, yeah.
Hi, my name is Jamie Ward. I'm originally from Louisiana, but right now I work in Virginia for a community service board. I'm a mental health emergency service worker. I also have individual therapy clients, and I do intake assessments. So in a small community, I do a little bit of everything.
So I'm going to put absolutely everyone on the spot because I just got an idea. Maybe before taking questions, I'd say like if you're all here, it's because we are, queer ourselves. And so just for the perspective of a therapist, what does it change for you as a queer person to work with queer clients? Yeah, what does it, does it change something? If it changed something?
I would say from my perspective, yes. One of the things that I've discovered working with queer individuals in addictions is that there's other things that's definitely going to be layers of that. They're not just coming in with the substance use. There's going to be issues with all sorts of things, and I know even during ClexaCon and other panels, there's a lot of things they've already talked about, but coming out, are they out to their family, self-identity, and so a lot of that's going to impact their road to recovery, and definitely making sure too that they're connected in the community there where I'm from, making sure they're connected where they're going to get that support, definitely. So that's really where I would make sure I'm identifying where they're coming from and making sure that I'm keeping that in mind when they're getting the treatment with me with addiction. So
Yeah, I would say pretty much the same. Given the fact that we are in a private practice, it's a little bit different. We do get to kind of not choose the clients that we have, but we do kind of get our pick of them. And so I feel like if that is also one of the first things we ask during an intake. We ask about their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their pronouns, things like that are super important to me personally as a therapist, because that means that there will be a certain level of self-disclosure on my part. I do believe in self-disclosure when it comes to doing therapy with minority populations, if you are also part of that minority, because that does foster another level of a bond to the therapeutic alliance. So I think that's super important, and definitely I think from the perspective of the client, it means that they won't need to explain as much to me as their therapist, just because we would have that common history, common shared culture of certain things, certain heterosexism, homophobia, all of those things that we don't have to explain to each other why we're suffering from it.
So for me, I grew up in a small Bible Belt town, and then even now I work in a small Bible Belt town. So a lot of that is, like I said, self-disclosure. I used to intern at inpatient, and I had a girl who was telling me about her struggles, and she wanted to come tell me her sexuality, and she was asexual. And being asexual myself, under that flag, I was able to just self-disclosure, and I was able to build more of a bond. So even now in my new job, I'm newer there, so I'm not out to my coworkers. But when I get walk-ins, especially the young kids in that town who are being sent to me because they're suicidal or because I had one little girl tell me that she thinks the school sent her to me because they were hoping someone in our facility could cure her of her bisexuality. And I was like, well, sweetie, they sent you to the wrong person. Nothing wrong with you. So a lot of what I do is to make sure that people know that there's nothing wrong with them. You're in this small town that doesn't want you, or you feel that way, but there's someone there that you can go to. So that's what I try to do, is give them that.
Yeah, and I mean, as for me, as you said, we do advertise as a queer-friendly practice. And for our own self-disclosure, it depends a bit of the clients, but also we have a very subtle self-disclosure things. You'll buy dragon mugs and that kind of thing, and the gigantic rainbow flag in the practice. But we're also maybe a bit more cautious depending on the client, of course. And I mean, for me, it does help. Like, originally, when we started the practice, we didn't necessarily want to be openly queer-friendly, but we realized that even in the Netherlands, which is supposed to be super welcoming, and it's true that things are better there than in a lot of places, but that there was a lack of specialized therapists, and that a lot of people were just struggling to find therapists who would really understand them. And then you just Google it, and you can like LGBTQ-friendly therapist, and there's not much that comes up. So we said, like, yeah, we should actually be overtly queer and offer that.
Yeah.
And it really helps, and that's why people come.
Yeah, and I think given the experience that we have working in the Netherlands, the healthcare system is a lot different than it is here, which I would ask you to explain how it works, because
How much time do you have?
all I'm saying is that, in the Netherlands it's pretty centralized, so it's kind of like if you go to a GP, you get referred to a clinic, and then you basically are given a therapist you don't get to choose. And so you have to stick with that person, otherwise you won't be reimbursed by insurance. That's usually how it works.
But yeah, you have to pay, which you might not have if you...
Yeah, especially if you're like an expat or a queer artist, populations with low income, they have to kind of...
Expats have a lot of money, though.
Some expats do. Some immigrants don't, because there's a distinction in the Netherlands. And so, these people, they have to go to a therapist that perhaps doesn't understand their experience, doesn't want to understand their experience, doesn't have the tools to approach them the right way, simply because they subscribe to one certain psychological school of thought. So there, it's quite crucial to have diverse options when it comes to mental health care, and we try to offer that, especially in terms of price, because we aren't reimbursed by insurance, but we do sliding scale fees, and that really helps the people that come to us. So, American healthcare.
That's going to take much more time than we have.
It's very complicated. Depends on
No, so... yeah.
I work in a community mental health setting, so it's really... It's kind of a little, I mean, is everyone familiar with like a community mental health provider here? Like in a community? Most communities have like an umbrella, like community mental health agency, and a lot of times you'll have offered like a psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, sometimes group therapy. I know you had mentioned you're in a smaller community.
I'm at a smaller branch, but overall, the community service board is all around Virginia. There's different branches, yeah.
Okay. I work for, I'm actually from Fort Wayne, Indiana, so we have an agency that's pretty large. We have like 400 employees. So I think it kind of differs. I've worked other places where they're smaller. It's just usually, it's like a big umbrella agency that's supposed to be an all-inclusive, where you can go in and get multiple services depending on what you need. I think it depends on the agency. I have to work, unfortunately, around what my agency tells me that I can and can't do. We don't have anything specifically that's LGBT, but I do self-disclose, like you said, if I have individuals that come in, and I definitely do try to tailor my treatment with anyone from the LGBTQ community. I'm known, we work in a team setting, so I'm known in the team as someone that likes to work with the LGBT, so sometimes if someone starts with another group or a therapist, they may actually refer to me saying that there's someone that's kind of more, they call it more of a specialization. And so they're really good about being aware of that within our team. Now, coming in and knowing that, it's kind of like, I think what you were saying, like your system was you would do an intake and then get set up with someone, and that intake person may or may not know that they're looking for that. They may find out down the road that someone might need that, so.
Right, that's kind of how we do too. Like I said, I wear a lot of hats at the small service board that I work for, and we do intakes. We don't specifically act sexuality during the intake, so that, you know, something that might not come out. But even though I'm not out to my community service board, I make sure that they know that I'm down. With LGBTQ, I'm trying so hard to get a group started for it. And so people know to keep me in mind if they hear about that. They're like, oh, you know, Jamie knows a lot about that. You know, we'll refer them to her. So I try to make sure that they know that I know a lot about the community. Keep that going. But yeah, like she said, they come in, they kind of tell what's going on, and from there you start out with, this is, you know, who you get. But it's good to know that, at least where I'm from, and hopefully more with service boards, that if you don't like your therapist or your psychologist, you are allowed to change it. Okay? Like, if you're not
yes.
comfortable, you
Yes.
can say, yeah,
Yes.
nope, this isn't for me. I don't
Yes.
got to stick with you. Shop around.
Absolutely.
I would also have to add, I think it's something we discussed already on the previous panel, but there's a lot of gatekeeping going on among mental health professionals who work with, specifically with transgender people. Because if you go to a gender clinic, a gender team in the Netherlands, you have to see a psychologist if you were to medically transition, which means that you have to convince the person that you are trans enough, which takes a while, and then you have to live as your chosen gender for a year, which means that if you're a trans woman, you have to wear heels and paint your nails, and there's no other way around it. So it's a very antiquated system. And when people go to see these gender clinics, that is the only way they can get access to mostly free transition, which means that they have to not be true to themselves when they go to that kind of therapy. And then later they come to us and they're like, everything I said to that other therapist is actually bull, and this is how I really feel. So there's a really big disparity there. Hopefully they will fix it at some point. But right now, this kind of gatekeeping, you know, having a therapist who also holds that power over you is really, really, really problematic.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the only way to transition, but it's like
It's the safest, easiest.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the main way.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah. Isn't it? Maybe we should actually take questions and see where it leads.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I have a list of things to ask. But do we have any questions?
Questions
Don't be
from
shy.
anybody? We don't bite.
We don't bite.
Hi. I do billing at a mental health private practice, and I know that private practice is heavily on the religious base, so they're not really LGBTQ friendly, even though I know they won't turn anyone away. And for me, it hurts me that that's a fact. So I guess my question is, how can I help them see that it's a client who just wants support and needs help, and for them to be able to separate the religion aspect out of the care?
Could I ask you? May I ask you a question? Is it like Christian? The assumption I made in my brain was Christian, and I don't want to jump to. Is it Christian based?
It's a good assumption.
But it's so I'm related to the owner of the business.
Well,
So I know that.
That really puts you in a hard position then.
Yeah. So they don't promote it as a religious center. So they get, anyone comes into the practice.
I mean, I'm not going to instance that because I'm going to be super rude.
Yeah, I was trying to be nice. Maybe you're just going to be blunt.
Okay, I'm just going to be, because for me, religious-based practice is unethical. I'm from a very secular country, live in another secular country. So if you work with evidence-based technique, you base your work on research, and any religious belief has no room in therapy. You can respect and use your client's religious beliefs because it's part of their worldview. It's important to accept them and work with them in the theoretical process. But my own religious beliefs have nothing to do with my work as a therapist. I say that even sometimes my theoretical options as a therapist, I put them aside to do what works for the client. So yeah, it's I don't really have an answer to that question because it's not something that we would be confronted with. I don't think so. But maybe to really recenter on what therapy should be, which is normally evidence-based, and I'm not going to say it's not like it's not math. There's not one way of doing it, but there is research out there, and we know that there are evidence-based techniques, and the research that's been done on the LGBTQ community and mental health shows that the real risk that being queer is not a choice, and all of that, which is, I mean, there's a corpus of evidence and of a lot of books written on it, and to maybe steer everyone in that direction of maybe go back to the science a little bit.
Yeah, I would say, I do have a couple of religious clients, and I self-disclose from the get-go. I'm an atheist. I was raised Orthodox Christian, which is very difficult. And so whenever a client comes in and tells me about their religion, because that's also something I ask, I just let them know from the get-go that I'm not going to work with you religiously. I will work with your spirituality. Because spirituality can be a very important tool in therapy, but you really have to boil it down to that spiritual aspect, not organized religion. That is something I'm very much against. That's my personal opinion, and that's something that I, disclose to the client from the get-go so that they can make an informed decision on whether they want to continue working with me. But to answer your question, I would go with what MD said, is just, try to be more scientific. Because that's where we get results. Not to say that clients' religion cannot be used in therapy with them, if that is something very powerful in their life, as long as they know that there is not one way to be Christian or not one way to be Muslim or any other religion. They understand that it's about their connection with God and their connection with their beliefs rather than their connection to dogma, which is something very different.
What I was thinking of, and I'm glad they went first. I was trying to think of a nice kind of a way of. The only thing that really concerns me about that, and I don't know the ins and outs of it, is that my understanding in terms of ethically, we have to always be upfront about our theoretical orientation, and I would definitely think that would be an orientation that they have, that they would be needing to tell their clients that that's where they're coming from so that the client can make that decision. I know that was spoken to previously, that you always have that right, because really you're a consumer of a service as a client. And if you go in and someone says to you, we are religiously Christian based, and someone comes in, maybe they are atheist or just not comfortable because of maybe some of the things that we're talking about with the LGBTQ, queer community, then they make that decision for themselves from the get-go, then know, 5 months down the line that, oh, wait a minute, this is the perspective we've been, looking at. I would think that, and I don't know how it's ran there, but I would hope they're telling them that up front so that they know and they can make that choice for themselves. And I don't know, but I would hope they are doing that so they can make that choice for themselves, so.
Yeah, my answer to that question too would be how much is the person that you're talking about who runs the practice is willing to learn about the LGBT community? Because like I tell all my clients, we can control what we do, but we can't control what other people do. So if they're not willing to learn or to, to actually work with them and their sexuality or their orientation or, whatever, then unfortunately there's not much you can do.
Yeah.
Do we have another question?
So one thing that I found through personal experience, obviously this is just one time and it couldn't be different every other time, but I found a therapist who was labeled themselves as being queer friendly. And it wasn't an overt question like on my first session, but almost immediately somehow the fact that I said I wasn't in a relationship and there was no chance of me being pregnant, and she started to ask more questions about my orientation and who am I dating or whatever, and I basically said I'm asexual, which is, how I identify, and it kind of got like dropped, like, okay, moved on. And then like repeatedly throughout weeks, it come back up. It's like, oh, maybe you should try this, or maybe you should do that. And I was like, whoa, like how did this happen? So to form this into a question, I guess I'd say too, like, I mean, obviously all of you are coming from a personal perspective, you know, with dealing with your clients, but, you know, do you feel like there's any movement for education for other therapists or mental health professionals to become more involved in, you know, the nuances of LGBT and not just think, I'm accepting, so it's fine, you know?
I think there's definitely, if they're willing to be educated, to her point, but she just ended with that, I would say there's a lot of options out there. Even if somebody lives in an area where there's not a lot of trainings, like if you're in a little small town, I mean, we've got the World Wide Web, you know, you can be educated. There's so many trainings online. There's journals, there's all kinds of things that I think it kind of comes back to, like, I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and so one of the things that I have to do in my state, and I think this is pretty much across the board in the U.S., is I have to have so much training to keep my license. Now, the state mandates that I have so much in, like, ethics, but the rest of that, which is like 36 hours or something, I could choose whatever I do in that. So I would hope that, you know, people in this field would educate themselves in areas that they're not so knowledgeable about. You know, whether it be, you know, the community that, like you were talking about, like the nuances with that, or, you know, I've ran into people, mental health professionals, who don't know anything about what I do with addictions. They don't know the difference between, like, cocaine and heroin. And so they have to have the education. I mean, I'm just being real, they don't. But I hope that they have that. It's out there. It's out there for them to get that education if they want it. Definitely. So.
Right. I was going to say that, yeah, people say they're queer friendly, and that's kind of thing I was talking about, I think, a couple days ago, was that, you know, a lot of people say they're queer friendly, but then it seems they're queer friendly for the G and the L. And that, like, I haven't disclosed to my coworkers, mainly because sometimes I don't even disclose to other LGBT people because I don't want to explain what demisexual is or why I don't want to have sex with someone, you know, like, I get those questions from other LGBT people, and so I'm definitely not going to come out to no straight person. So I feel that, yeah, when you're not that normal letter, you're going to someone you think is gender, you know, accepting and all that. Nah, maybe, you know, and then you feel like, and so it's hard. So, like, yeah, that education, that is that person willing to challenge themselves and be like, just, you know, maybe I shouldn't try to fix this girl because we ain't broken.
Yeah, that's one thing I thought too. I was like, I am self-aware enough that I just know you're wrong.
Right.
But I was thinking this is so dangerous for someone who doesn't know that, or for someone who doesn't even know there is a community for this, you know, who thinks that they're just giving their personal preference, and then someone's saying, well, maybe you should try this. Like, you know, they're going to think, well, maybe I should. And,
right.
You know, that, like, really, like, it was more for, like, everyone else. I was like, oh, my God, like, this is not cool.
And that can even challenging the therapist, being like, you know, I don't think this is going to work out, and here's why.
Yeah, no,
tell them.
I
agree.
tried to educate her, and, like, it seemed like sometimes it got through to an extent, but then it kind of just, like, regressed back, and I was like, okay, well, we're done.
And that's the other thing about, we can't, you know, what people are, you know, we control ourselves, we can't control other people. But it also, yeah, becomes, even if you have the right, a nasty review, something, you know, we have to try to educate, try very, 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 very hard.
But yeah. Also, one thing, if you don't, it was just that it would come back up, blocking out other more important things to me, where I'm like,
right.
Hey, this isn't what I'm here for.
Right. It's like, I remember in school, we always talk about, you know, just because a gay man comes to you, you're not, the therapy isn't going to be about the fact that they're gay. Yeah. That's probably not even why they're sad. It's about, you know, why did they come to you? If they're sad and it's connected to them being gay, sure, great. Absolutely. But your sexuality is never going to be the focus. Yeah. It shouldn't be.
No.
Good point.
I mean, I'd say that there are a lot of not so good therapists out there, and you can change, as Jamie said earlier. Yeah. That I think that it's therapists who are not ready to question themselves and the way they practice might be good therapist.
And also report them to the ethics board.
Yeah,
we have that.
We need to question ourselves, and we do question ourselves. And then there are a lot of resources available, even online, to train more. there's like something that's called Pink Therapy. It's a British organization, and they train people in therapy working with not only LGBTQ plus people, but also all type of different sexual practices, kink, etc. And they are very well known, and they offer a lot of different type of training. So it's an example among others, and they're not difficult to find. So it's completely possible, but it's not easy to sometimes move away from beliefs, theoretical orientation that are actually beliefs. Yeah.
And I think beyond just simple education, like picking up a book or going online or going on freaking Tumblr, you can learn a lot about different sexualities and gender identities there. It's not that hard. I think it's also about asking the client what the label they use means to them. Because my definition of asexual or bisexual may be different to your definition of that. And that's absolutely fine. We just need to figure out how those definitions can overlap and how we can work together, because what I think about it, my opinion, should not have to matter to your process of recovery or your process of feeling better, especially if you're trying to come to terms with your sexuality or your gender identity. So I think that a therapist needs to not only be educated on the different ins and outs of sexuality and gender identity, but also to have that, enough self-awareness to be able to ask, okay, but what does it mean for you? And how can I challenge my beliefs with what you just told me, because you are what matters.
And we're here to work on your presenting problem, as you said, and not something else. And I think it's maybe one of the of saying if your therapist has a choice of how they're going to conduct their intake, it's my own opinion, but it's that if they, at one point, maybe not the first thing, but at one point they ask you about your sexual orientation, your gender identity, your pronouns, it's a very good sign. If they don't, maybe it's because they don't have a choice, because it's a policy of the place they're working at, but...
That would be me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm just going to be honest, I got to snake that in somehow, my own sneaky way.
Yeah, but it's...
Yeah. I work part-time at a university, and so I have a lot of young kids come in, and as per the intake form that I have, I also can't really ask that question, but a lot of the times also, now this generation, like 18, 19-year-olds, at least in the Netherlands, they self-disclose a lot. A lot of the times, I would have to say that being queer does most of the time have something to do with the presenting problem, because stigma, because internalized bullshit, all of that, it does kind of play a role in someone's, especially their anxiety, their depression, it kind of starts coming up. But if it doesn't come up, if they casually mention that, I have a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever friend, then that's something that we set aside and just make sure that that aspect of their life is okay for them. If that's functional for you, I really don't care who you're sleeping with. So I think that self-disclosure is important, and paying extra attention to that is important if the person brings it up. If the person doesn't bring it up, then you're just sitting there quietly, you're listening, and you're making sure that you're making the connections in your head.
Oh, you're cheering for you.
Yay, therapy.
Yeah. Do we have another question?
Yeah.
So I'm from Mexico, and I'm from not really queer-friendly environment. So how do you think that it will be like a safe way to express that I feel like I need some kind of therapy, or like that I need help with something, when in Mexico it's like a taboo thing. Like
It's a what thing? I'm sorry.
like a therapy. You need to go to church and pray, or like
Okay.
you need to go to a
Don't go to a priest.
Okay,
or
yes.
like it's because it's you're a woman and you're in your period, or like no, I do need help. I do get anxious, and this happen like a lot. It's not my period. I do need help.
Is it in relation?
I'm from Puerto Rico,
Mhm.
and it's really common in the Latin community in general. There's very, if you go to a therapist or a psychiatrist, you're insane. Just to mention it, it's like, oh, you're crazy. And what you actually need is to like be positive and be with your family and just reassuring whatever.
Yeah,
And that's really common, so it's hard to actually talk about it.
Well,
You don't come from a...
yeah. So I'm from Ukraine, which is former Soviet Republic, where psychiatry was used as a punishment. For many years, for decades, people who were political dissidents were locked up in either the Gulag or a psychiatric ward. And so there is a lot of distrust towards the mental health system, and a lot of like, if you are mildly depressed or you have an eating disorder, you are going into a mental ward and you're going to be roomies with someone with severe schizophrenia, for example. So there is a lot of stigma surrounding mental health there, because there is, first of all, stigma for the person. They are afraid of appearing quote unquote crazy, and also for their family, because nobody wants to have a crazy person in their family. And there is definitely a lot of emphasis on religion there as well. I worked with a Ukrainian guy who fled from Ukraine to the Netherlands because of his sexuality. Very long story, but the first person he went to see after having suicidal thoughts in the Netherlands was to an Orthodox priest in Rotterdam instead of seeking mental health care. And when he told me that, I was like, what did it do for you? He said it did nothing. It just convinced me that I don't want to be Orthodox Christian anymore. So I think to answer your question, I think it's up to us. It's up to the younger generation to start beating that stigma. It's also good to look outward, look at countries where it's a little bit more accepted, try to find resources there, work with therapists. Even there's a lot of teletherapy going on, work with therapists on Skype who would be accepting of that. There's a lot of expat Latino therapists, even in Europe, who would be able to tackle that a lot better. That's my perspective.
We actually have that situation with some French clients who live in more in the countryside and who don't have any resources there for them. So I work with them on Skype, and it works very well. So those resources exist. You can just actually Google it. You have also pink therapy. A lot of people are based in the UK, but there's a registry there where you can find a therapist based on even the sexual orientation and gender identity of your therapist. So you can find someone who really matches with what you need, and a lot of them, and some of them, do Skype. So, and there are people it's mostly in the UK, but some of them are based in other countries like us. And there's you can have those kind of resources. Of course, therapy by Skype is not for everyone, but sometimes it's the best you can have right away, and it's there's no stigma, no one knows. Also, I have people in other countries actually where no one knows that they're seeing a therapist, but it works. And they can talk to someone who's completely outside of their community where they live, and you can also find someone who still has a cultural sensitivity to understand your situation. Either, as you said, Latinx, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry, I'm not from here, but someone who would really be of Mexican origin, or someone at least who will have a similar culture, or just who's trained to work with people with diverse backgrounds. So that you can really find those resources online.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have experience with your community mental health, because in Florida we're really pushing a lot of that, because a lot of people, because of the stigma, prefer to go up here. So are you seeing that in your neck of the woods?
Oh, we have peer advocates. Our CSB does a lot. The town we live in is a lot of substance abuse. We have a lot of substance people who used to be substance abusers. Now it's peer support, and they go to things like that. So we have that, but not a lot for other things, especially where I'm from. But like I said, I'm trying to get that LGBT group started. keep telling my director, there's money in that budget, give it to me. But that's why we also do group therapy, is to like meet other people and other peers and feel more comfortable and hear more stories. But yeah, where I'm from, we hire people for that, but it's not as branched out as I would like.
No, because they're really pushing that, because there are a couple of grants fitted
Mm-hmm.
to do that. Tragic health situation, mental health has really been on the forefront in Florida.
Mhm. Yeah, and we also have, in terms of the recovery side, where I'm from, we have a huge, and I know this is nationwide, but and where I'm from in Indiana, we have a huge opiate crisis right now, and so our agency has hired people to help more with that, because it's out of control where I'm from in terms of people dying from opiate. So we do have people that we specifically hired for that, and we do have people, and this gets kind of tricky with self-disclosure, but we do have therapists and recovery specialists who have been in recovery themselves. So, but it gets a little bit, not necessarily what you're talking about, but they have to kind of walk that line too with them, but they do try to integrate some of that if they can. So, but we're looking at that. That's been coming up too for us. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have a completely different perspective on that, but we were lucky enough to be trained at an American university in the Netherlands, where our practicum and our internship consisted of giving free therapy to people who needed free therapy. And so a lot of these people were students, a lot of these people were, well, my age at least, and so I knew that they felt a lot more comfortable being with someone who was younger, who kind of understood that generational thing that was happening. A lot of the universities in the Netherlands as well sponsor peer support groups, so that's really good. And fortunately, there are some organizations that are founded and they have funding from the city halls, and so they can use that funding as they see fit. Sometimes they do go for mental health support, and they do seek out, well, even us or other therapists who can conduct regular group therapy or train people, also younger people, to be able to at least provide some form of support. Definitely not, straight on therapy, but enough so that they can at least support that person until they can get some help. But yeah, that's the Dutch perspective. It's quite different.
And there's a very interesting, though, peer program in Amsterdam about for gay men who tend to practice chemsex. So chemical sex, basically.
Sex on drugs.
Sex on drugs, yeah. Orgies on drugs, and it's it's a huge problem in the gay man community, and it's really a problem also because it happened in the LGBTQ community, where you find your second family, where you need the peer support, you need the social support. You are, it's a lot of people who are actually rejected by their family. We find support within the community, and here one of the practice of the community is this chemsex, which is hurtful, and also because it leads to unprotected sex. So it's really a huge health issues, and because of that, they do the peer support program, because it's very difficult for people to say, okay, I need to turn my back to that side of the community, but I still need the social support that the community brings to me. So they did that peer-to-peer support, and people who are already out of the system, who used to practice chemsex but found a way out of it, who do it's a type of sponsor thing, kind of, where they will help men who want to get out of that type of practice and change their that aspects of their life, and that, for what I heard, it works pretty well.
And you just reminded me too, when you said that, I've been in my same job for about 7 years, and about 3 years ago, I had a couple of out clients in group. They were in two separate halfway houses for recovery, and they kept talking about how there was not a LGBTQ, like AA meeting. Is everyone familiar with AA? Do you guys know what AA is? Okay. I think everyone was on it. Like Alcoholics Anonymous is it's like a community support group, And they actually, and I was so proud of these ladies for doing this, they actually went to the AA organization where I'm from, and they started an LGBTQ AA meeting. And actually, what I'm hearing now, it's so popular because people are so affirming and so open that it's like one of the biggest ones in my city is the LGBTQ AA meeting. And so that was really cool, and I think that's amazing that they did that. That's been running for about 3 years, so that's kind of more of the peer support. Thank you for saying that. When you said sponsor, that triggered my memory that we have that in my community, so.
Yeah. Is there another question? Yeah.
Related, not necessarily peer support, but my daughter has a large group of queer friends, being queer herself. What I'm finding, they spend a lot of time with them because most of them are not out. And I'm one of the few parents that they can be out too, so spend a lot of time in my house.
You have a really important role. You do.
Reminding me, and that's why I said not to
You
stay
really
in the
do.
house.
Yes.
And I even told her, if any of them thought that their parents find out and they get kicked out, they come here and tell all of them that, because they don't, a lot of them, it's like that is probably what's going to happen. But what's happening in this process, because now they're teenagers, and I'm finding a lot of correlation between mental health, and also a lot of these kids come from poor families. Even though we're a middle-class neighborhood, we very much defer to seeing. So when I talk about them, I just wanted to say
I'm going to. Do you hear like what she's saying? Because these are like doing some karaoke there.
I'm really, that's why I'm not trying to stare, but I'm trying to like, okay, well, I'm trying to make sure I know what you're saying. It's so loud behind me. It's awesome. Thank you.
Yes, okay. All right.
Once more whose feelings were away?
It's like, I'd like to explain, but let me sum up because there's no time to explain. Wow, are they getting louder over there?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Competition, let's win.
Right. A queer daughter with queer friends that can't be out in a suburban community that's not open at all. We don't even have an LGBT support center there. There's a GSA in the high school, and that's about it. That's about as far as it goes. So I've become a safe house for all of her friends because it's the only place they can be out. But I'm now dealing with mental health issues with them. They're coming and they're sitting at my kitchen table and talking to me about anxiety and depression. And as I'm not a professional psychologist. I don't have that as a degree. I'm a sex ed educator, but not I'm wondering how, as an adult support for kids who can't turn to their parents and say, I need to talk about this in therapy, what resources are for people who are not trained therapists that can provide support for LGBTQIA kids who either can't get therapy because their parents can't afford it, can't get proper therapy because their therapist nor their parents are supportive, or they're not even out. What could I do or other supportive parents do to provide help that we can't as non-professionals?
They do have an organization here, PFLAG.
I'm a member.
Okay. I know that's definitely a resource. I think going back to what was talked about before, the online I think is definitely a resource. I'm real not familiar with financial or how that works, but I'm wondering maybe connecting them if there's some that would be, I don't know if there's some LGBTQ resources for, because I'm sure that they're absolutely not alone in this country or around the world really, that they don't have a lot of resources. And I'm wondering online if there's resources for them to get connected. I don't want to glaze over the fact, I know I said this again, but I think what you're doing is so important.
Yeah.
That you're supportive of them. I think that's, I know you're saying you're not a licensed professional, but being supportive of them and what you're doing, it's more therapeutic than you're giving yourself credit for. So.
I went on a class trip recently, and I wound up being basically the therapist for that.
Maybe you should be. Maybe you should. Maybe there's a calling in that.
Yeah, but that's good. I didn't think, because I know, I've sent people like Scarlettine and things like that.
Okay.
For questions that I want to answer. I ride this line, making sure that I don't get in trouble for what their parents don't want to know. I want them. I'm sorry.
They've really quieted
But
down.
I know, I don't know. But it would be interesting to find, look at Scarlet Team for LGBTQIA, and I know that they are all inclusive, but it might be good. I wonder if there is a online support that is specifically for mental health for LGBTQIA.
There's also a lot of phone numbers, national phone numbers to call,
Yeah.
like the Trevor Project and just a
Yes.
bunch of stuff
Thank
like
you.
that.
Yeah,
That they can literally
yeah.
call a therapist, and I think is even anonymous to a degree.
That's true.
Yeah, so I don't think it's really, because I know we don't charge for crisis, because I do after-hours crisis, where I could get called to the hospital for mental health assessments, or I could get crisis phone calls. And so we have that for our area, so I know there's national ones, and we don't charge for crisis calls. That I'm aware of, we don't charge for them, because some people would be in debt right now, times they call. But so we don't charge for that, so I think the same thing for those national ones, is that they're anonymous to a degree, and they can talk to somebody who's actually who is more, trained, or not a family member, or someone that they feel like they might get in trouble, or they might say too much, or they might feel like they've been rejected for whatever reason. They can talk to someone, because I know a lot of people just want to talk to someone who's anonymous. Yeah, so they could do that. It's a national phone call, definitely, for sure, or things.
Yes.
And I mean, we talked about that in the panel yesterday, but like therapy 101 is empathy and non-judgment, and that's what you're offering them.
Exactly.
And that's already a lot, that they can have this space to talk. Yeah.
I would say in terms of resources for yourself, to feel that you are more equipped. I would also say there are a lot of online resources just to learn more about queerness in general. Podcasts are a great source of information. Podcasts, certain section of Twitter, if you keep it confined. And there's definitely people out there, like even people who run those podcasts, you can definitely email them, and they will respond to you, and they will clarify things for you. I see that there is quite a big supportive online community that you can definitely directly contact and make sure that if there is a term you don't know or a situation you've never dealt with before, they will take the time out of their day to answer you, and at least using that community resource, you can learn more.
And there's something as, going back to the pink therapy thing, but they have a Facebook page that you can just follow, and they actually link a lot of articles, resources. They actually have free resources there that are pretty interesting.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Anyone else? Yeah.
So I used to I used to go to the therapist for a long time when I was younger for anger management issues. It's not a heavy bullying thing, it was nonsense. But, and I really did trust this therapist, and I still do. Due to events that happened about a year ago, I wanted to try and reach out to her again, but she hasn't been responding. And I'm not sure it's because she's booked up or some other thing. But I wanted to know if you guys had any tips for trying to find another therapist, maybe. I have anxiety, so meeting people is already hard enough. That's a very broad question, and I don't really know how to funnel it.
Well, I can.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Where are you from?
San Diego.
So like tips in terms of looking for someone that is like a safe, queer-friendly therapist?
The reason I wanted to go back to them was because they already knew my home environment, and they already knew my environment. They knew I was gay, they knew how I grew up, and all that other stuff. So I wanted to try and reach out to them, and if they weren't available, to have them help me find another person who they could recommend. But that hasn't been working out.
I have two suggestions. Psychology Today. You could go in there and you could read all the bios of all the psychiatrists, psychologists, and things like that.
Don't mind this, by the way. This is all.
No, it's okay.
No, you're fine.
It's like, I'm
Don't-
a key certified professional, so I'm used to this, and that's why I'm trying to assist you. And then the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom. They have a resource page specifically for ethical non-monogamy, sexual orientation, gender, there for all various different services that can help you.
Can you read?
Step up to the mic.
Keep the mic with you.
Let's go pass it around.
Between the two of us here. It's exactly. It's just easier at this point. Okay. As I was saying, Psychology Today is it tells all the different psychologists available. Keywords to look for: lifestyle, LGBT, but lifestyle is the one that you know that they're open, because a lot of the kink community looks for that, and that's what helps out. And the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, NCSF, has a lot of resources available there, not only just therapists or coaches, but lawyers and doctors, things of that are alternative lifestyle friendly. So LGBT, kink, ethical non-monogamy. So those are resources that you could go and you could look up and talk, and I know from the NCSF, they verify and they make sure that they are partners with them.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, NCSF is great. So I've thought of that a number of times.
And I was thinking if you have like a local LGBTQ center, they probably have too, where you could direct you to therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, and they would have others that they've something like that, or maybe like a PFLAG referral of someone that they know is really good too. I was thinking something in the community like that, or those would be great.
Yeah.
People like this chapters all over the country. You go to their site, they will show you where all chapters are.
Also, sometimes for your health insurance, because I know that in the U.S. it's a big aspect of seeking care. Depending on who you have your insurance through, they have resources online that you can use to look for local therapists and psychologists, and you can then sort that way through, if you're looking for someone in the queer community, if you're looking for someone specifically women, men, they really help sort it out so you can find someone that is more specific as to what you're looking for.
Yeah, I tried doing that because I'm a Kaiser.
I'm sorry.
Oh no.
That's why insurance in America is very difficult.
That's when we
That's the problem.
But also, if you have if you know any LGBT friends or people in your community that you already know, and see who they go to, that's always good. I have a lot of people who are in a small town, so I see a lot of the same people. Yeah, small. Yeah.
I don't get out much.
That is fun. We said, internet is an amazing thing. They connect us to a majority of things.
Yep.
Like I said, telecom psych is a thing. I think texting psych therapy is becoming more of a thing.
It is.
There is technology is a beautiful thing. So just about, like I said, that's why I tell everybody, shop around. Like I said, you don't gotta see the same therapist, and therapists change all the time anyway, which is upsetting and triggers people. And then I see them in the hospital, but it happens. But there's online so much there. Even in a small town, we feel like we're alone. It connects us to a bigger world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would definitely say that teletherapy is a great solution for that. I mean, I'm a highly anxious person myself, so even going to a doctor sometimes is quite difficult. But given the fact that you can just sit in your room and stare at a webcam, I find it more therapeutic because I feel less judged. So definitely try looking for therapists to do that. There's plenty of people who work on Skype, on Zoom, like other apps that will make sure to preserve your privacy.
I know that I had seen like a couple times on Facebook, because Facebook is just like that, where it was just like some sort of ads for therapists online, but it was one of those things where it's like you could put an ad up for anything, and you didn't really know how to respond to that.
Yeah, and that's why in Psychology Today too, and at CSF, they do say which therapists do accept teleconference, video, Zoom there.
And you can sometimes have therapists who post on like private Facebook groups, like more LGBTQ oriented, and generally if they post there, that they are queer friendly. And when you go to their website, it's about like checking their credentials, whether they're affiliated, the licensing, where they are at, and it's already good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. We have time for another question.
Let's just look at each other.
Okay.
selling on Etsy to raise money for suicide prevention. I've raised around $1,700. But I'm always thinking of like, I want to do more. And so I'm like, what are like some suggestions that you would have that like anyone could do to like be a better like mental health ally to people in their communities?
Getting with NAMI, if you haven't already. NAMI's a fantastic organization. They do a lot in a lot of places. So definitely look up on their website and see what kind of volunteer work or something they do, or just anything else in your community that's like some mental health or even LGBT related, if there is something.
Yeah, I would definitely say if you're comfortable with that, be visible. Put yourself out online, tweet regularly, make sure that you are there as a safe space and people will reach out to you. In running the podcast, we never expected to have any sort of influence on any of our listeners. We didn't expect to have listeners. And now we're getting emails, like huge, gigantic emails of people telling us their life stories and talking about not only how listening to the podcast helped them, but also how, asking for more suggestions, asking for advice, for resources. So it's just a matter of being a little bit more visible if you're comfortable with doing that and being open to communication. I think a lot of the times people just need to know that there is someone out there who's ready to listen and ready to contribute to their life in a meaningful way.
That's what I was going to suggest too, NAMI, but also I think there's a lot to be said for being there just so that someone feels heard. I think a lot of times, it's just my personal kind of 2 cents, I think a lot of times suffering comes from that people don't feel heard. And if you can be there just as a listening ear, whatever the labels they use or the pronouns or wherever they're coming from, if you can just hear them, I think a lot of times that's what a lot of people just need, is someone just listening and being mindful and being there. Just time and presence can be really healing too. I think just being aware and just being that person that just a listening ear or listening text, if it's online, I think could do a lot just so people don't feel so alone.
But always with thinking about your own self-care.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yes.
Even therapists see therapists.
You definitely need to have boundaries and recognize how much you can do for someone and what is outside of your scope of not just, competence in terms of training, but also, your emotional health, because we use this metaphor of an oxygen mask. When you're in an airplane, you have to put it on yourself first before you help the person sitting next to you. Otherwise, you are no help to anyone, including yourself. So it is a matter of kind of delineating how much you are willing to do and how much energy you have, because the first person in your life is you. So make sure that you are not overstretching yourself there.
I mean, we're almost there. I'm going to put everyone on the spot again. I like that. Would you quickly, I guess, have an advice for everyone here, or maybe just a conclusion about what I can't even formulate my own question. It's the end of the day. What would be your final word advice so that people can know what to do to help themselves in terms of mental health? It could be the tip to take care of the self-care tip, mental health self-care tip to finish the panel.
Oh, so many.
My biggest, I feel like this has been a soapbox that I've been on for, I'd say, a year with all the people that I work with, is really just being an advocate for yourself. Making sure that if you're not comfortable with something going on, therapist, psychologist, I don't care who it is, that's okay. And you have a right to say, I'm not comfortable with this is not what I'm looking for, and go somewhere else. That's been my biggest thing that I've really been teaching clients, is that just be okay with that. Advocate for yourself, and empower yourself with that. You really have your own voice, and definitely use that when you're looking for these kind of services for yourself or for a loved one. Definitely be an advocate for yourself and for them. So.
Yeah, I would say, I say this a lot to the kids that I work with. You should do things that make you happy, at least one small thing every day. Tiny little, getting a coffee that you really like or whatever. Just one thing that will put a smile on your face. And also do things that make you feel masterful. Things that, set a small goal for yourself, as tiny as it can be. It can even be getting out of bed at the right time, right after your alarm sounds. That's a goal that you can set and accomplish. And that will make you feel competent. It will make you feel like you can do things today. So those are the two things that I always tell people. Just make yourself happy and make yourself feel like you are in control.
And yeah, I tell a lot of people that too. It's so hard to know. Sometimes you have to do a dish. That's good enough, man. That's a successful day in my book. But also, and it's such a small community like this, especially where I grew up, and even now in the Bible Belt. Don't be afraid to take out toxic people, even if they're the only other gay person you know. It doesn't mean that they're good for you or for your mental health. So just not being afraid to be like, this isn't good. This person, no. So yeah, not being afraid to cut out toxicity.
Yeah. And all of that. And since we are at ClexaCon, I'd say that also, it's great to watch stuff, entertain yourself, but do it in a way that makes you feel good. Watch things that make you feel good. We were at the Let's Watch panel earlier. They have this amazing database on their website with all basically the TV shows, even web series, everything is there. And you can choose shows depending on the kind of characters and how queer friendly they are. And to be able to watch media, watch TV in a responsible way, in a way that would make you feel good about yourself. And not to be just exposed to the bury or gay tropes or bad representation, because we all need that good representation, that good mirror that media can provide us. And it exists, not that much, but it exists.
It's getting better.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for coming to our panel. I hope we could provide some information for you today, and if you want to come and talk to us, we'll be right outside.
Yeah. And we're leaving some business cards if you want to.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.